Age divide in the Democratic Party remains strong. In Michigan alone, 82% of voters ages 18 to 29 support Sanders, while 73% of those 65 and older support Biden. And there's another age divide.
Indeed. Populism's influence in U.S. politics is rapidly growing, but the candidates those populists support are divided by age, with younger populists overwhelmingly supporting Sanders and older populists overwhelmingly lining up behind President Trump. To dive more into this trend is Irami Osei-Frimpong. He joins us now via Skype. Irami is a doctoral student at the University of Georgia. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me. I think it's a fascinating question about why aren't there more older populists on the left?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so what do you make of that? And before we get into that, tell people where they can find you on YouTube as well, so I don't forget to inform people about that too.
Yeah, if you like what I'm saying, you can go ahead and find me at thefunkyacademic.com or funkyacademic.com, or just on YouTube, put in my name, Irami or Funky Academic, and it'll be the guy who looks like me.
There you go. What do you make of this age divide where older populists tend to lean right and younger populists tend to lean left?
So with the Tea Party, I think it's pretty clear that populism can find a way in America with an older crowd. So why aren't there more mature left populists? And I think it's because of liberalism, right? I think there's something deeply depoliticizing about liberalism in a way that it'll allow you to choose between given options, but it won't actually enable or validate the structural change that goes into producing these options. And when I explain this to students, I talk about how if you want to be a vegetarian, you can be a liberal vegetarian. You can go into a restaurant, and then you can look and see the options are chicken and beef. And so you have choices between chicken and beef. And if someone can add a third choice, that'll be fine. They add fish, right? Those are three choices, but none of them allow you to actually self-determine yourself as a vegetarian. So that's the liberal kind of conundrum where you have choices, but since you don't understand that freedom has two parts, one, the choice, and two, the power to actually produce options, not just for yourself, but for everyone, you don't actually acknowledge and validate the necessity to organize with other people and create options for the whole. And that's a lot of what governing is.
That's
right?
Go ahead. I was saying, that's such a good point. Yeah, go ahead.
Conservatives take the content of freedom more seriously. Liberals will take the form of freedom, the choice, but conservatives take the content of freedom. And there's a great illustration of my work when I was in Chicago and during the Obama years, and they were closing schools left and right. And there were charter school advocates on the left and on the right. The charter school advocates on the left wanted more choice. Or the liberal charter school advocates, they wanted more choice. They wanted their children to excel. They didn't really care what was in the curriculum, but they just wanted their children to do well, right? The charter school advocates on the right didn't really care how well their kids did, but they were very serious about the curriculum. They took the curriculum very seriously. You were going to learn this. You were not going to learn this. Like it was, like I said, they didn't care if their kids went to Harvard or Yale. They did care if their kids learned the way the tradition told them to learn.
Right.
Just that difference alone, yeah.
Irami, tell us which is more conducive to governing. Which of those philosophies is more conducive to governing and actually executing whenever you come into power?
It's going to be the right? The conservatives, they take power seriously. If you're a liberal, you're not taking power seriously in terms of creating and imposing what you've come to on others. You create options for everyone. So freedom's going to have two aspects, a choice and the power to create options among which people choose. But liberals will tell you, well, for example, no one can tell me what to do with my body. But of course I can. If there's a coronavirus immunization, we're going to debate about it. We're going to pass laws. And if it's a forced immunization, then we're going to force you to get immunized. And we need to be honest about that. The conservatives at least get that right. And the hard left gets that right, gets that correct, because the hard left knows that, look, these markets and choices aren't going to desegregate my schools. They're not going to get the lead out of my water. It's just a liberal center that fails to consider how self-determination takes state power. Freedom isn't an individual affair. It's not what you choose between given options. It's working together to actually create the options.
Wow.
So you need both aspects.
It's so well said. Do you think it's a fool's errand for a populist left to try to appeal to older voters? Are there things that could be done? Like, what practical guidance would you give?
I mean, yeah, you have to get the old liberals to become left. Right? You have to. Well, first of all, there's a mental illness crisis in America, and I think it's because of despair, and I think it's this disconnection, and I think it's just liberalism run amok because there's no sense of fraternity. There's no sense of. All right, so maybe you guys were in this feeling when you had to choose between Trump and Hillary Clinton in 2016. You actively chose your way into alienation. Right, especially if you think that the Democratic primary was rigged. That means through your own actions, you were alienating yourself. And at the end, you kind of felt pretty gross at the end of it. And that's through your own actions. So we know that choice itself can't be enough, because I did choose between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, but that choice just was not very fulfilling. And at the end, I had made myself something I had not wanted to be.
And that's interesting, Irami, because what you're talking about is about the false, who determines the choice is really who has the power. I come from the right, so I definitely understand.
He gets it, yeah.
I mean, I've studied this for a while. I will say, a big deficit for the right is actually that a lot of the younger left are left populists. They're not necessarily on the right. Flip your switch a little bit, and how can right populists appeal to left populists?
How can right populists? Well, they have to give up the parochialism, right? So the difference between a right populist and a left populist is going to be, do we do this because tradition says we do it? Do we do it because it's just the way it's been done and it's worked? Or do we do it because we work out and we see this as an institution of freedom? For example, let's take something like housework, right? So the idea, like a left populist, if you're me, for example, I think maybe we should think about it the way we think of garbage, right? We used to have to individually take our garbage all the way down to the dump. Now we have people efficiently coming through and taking our garbage. What if we did that with housework and we had socialized cleaners? Because, for example, it shouldn't be a privilege of the wealthy. And conservatives will say no, we just make women do it. And liberals, the left will say no, maybe we should figure out a different way, but we should definitely socialize it. So the difference is going to be in how we come to what we force people to choose between.
And Irami, last question for you. Yes. Obviously, we're watching this primary play out between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, and Biden does unbelievably well with older voters, and Bernie does unbelievably well with younger voters who, unfortunately for him, do not vote that much. But so he needs to appeal to older voters to be able to win, and yet it seems to be like oil and water. And what do you think that is all about? Why is there such a disconnect? And what do you think that he could have done or could still do differently?
So the disconnect, I think we underestimate how selfish the boomers have always been, right? Their anti-miscegenation work was they just wanted to screw who they wanted to screw. They're getting rid of the draft was they didn't want to fight when they didn't want to fight. We underestimate that we never actually built a left among the boomers. This is why Bernie is a
septuagenarian.
Well, he's a septuagenarian. He's also an anomaly. But we never actually developed a quality of politics that would bring them along. I do think talking about content matters. Talking about and this is what the right does so much better, in terms of churches and institutions. And there's no left equivalent to focus on the family. There should be, because there are better and worse ways to justify a family, right? But there's no left equivalent to that deals with content. We need, if it were up to me, there would be a Chicago labor and an NYPD labor in the same way there's a Chicago PD and NYPD law and all those medical shows. There would be labor organizers. So we need to get into the culture game and develop content that makes the case that power's okay on the left. It's just how you process distributing it.
Interesting. Well, I guess I hope for my own sake that none of what you say comes to pass, but it is very interesting, and I appreciate you joining us.
So great to have your thoughts, Irami. Thank you so much.
See you, man.
Take care.
And we'll have more for you after this.